One of the most rewarding aspects of this project so far is the cooperation in consensus building as we have moved forward with developing options. There is a strong recognition and acceptance that it's not an either-or situation. There's not a silver bullet that is going to fix the crowding that is occurring at the jail. It's a combination of policies and practices. It's a combination of new programs and services. And it's a combination of capital investment in your current facility as we define that as we go forward. That's the good news. The more difficult news is that there's no cost option. Every decision that you choose with the options that I present has a dollar value associated with it as you go forward. And so I wish I could say that if you do nothing today and just continue on as business as usual, that you will no longer have to spend any additional funds. That's not going to be the case. But there are some options that are, I don't know if the word's better, that each option is different. Each option has a different cost associated with it. And as you'll see in our next steps, we're not finished yet with the work that we have to do. But this is a chance to give you an update and a piece of information about where we are in the process. So that's the introduction. I want to spend a little bit of time about data. The work group that's been formed, that's been working on this, has seen 3 or 4 of these presentations. There's been a fair amount of data that's been presented. I'm trying to show you the summary of that data that relates to some of the important decisions that you have to make as you go forward.
Correct me if my numbers are off a little bit, but in the last 20 years, we've done 2 school bond issues for $100 million each. I mean, just to put it into comparison to what money we're spending or talking about spending versus what's already been spent for other community involvement.
So when you put them side by side, here's your numbers. Using today's projections. Bonnie's point is well received. What number do you start with? I chose that 5-year average. It's a moving target. It'll continue to be a moving target to some degree, and looking at that, you won't fully understand the impact of everything. But here's the way the scenarios shake out right now. And the note at the bottom that the costs for 2, 3, and 4 have not been escalated out. It's that current historical number. And I've got backup sheets where we got those numbers from. Okay. A lot of information. Okay, so this is by no means intended to be the end. This is just an update of where we are with the project. It would not serve you well if I said, well, just choose an option and go forward and be done with it. I think there's maybe some ones that you could take off the table and say, let's focus more on some of these others. But one of the things that has to occur, to your point, Bob, about operational cost and staffing numbers is we need to put some staffing numbers to each one of the options to demonstrate, unless you pull one of them off, to demonstrate the cost to annually operate those facilities, to include some pretrial numbers. I think your pretrial numbers are low in terms of staff. If it really takes off, you may need some additional folks for that. We'll have that conversation. But we need to put now some annual operating costs to these, because hopefully it's recognized that the capital side of it is a one-time investment. If you have a 30-year life cycle of a building, your capital costs end up being about 10% to 15% of the total cost of that building over time. So it's the staffing cost, the non-staffing costs, food services, mechanical, electrical, utility costs, all that stuff gets figured in there. I typically just do the staffing number because that's the biggest part of the budget. 80-85% oftentimes is that part of the annual operating budget. So we need to figure out what the staffing costs are for each one of those options. We need to continue to look at pretrial services and how it's being implemented. I'm recommending that and Annie and I have talked about this, the committee she has looking at pretrial services, also drilling a little bit, sounds like they've done some more with this court docketing and the sentencing decision-making to understand, can we make some adjustments there? It sounds like some of it may already be occurring, but keep that process going. There'll be more presentations to the small work group, and there'll be obviously 1 or 2 or 3, whatever it takes, more presentations back here, but we need to get some more information on this. But this is where we are today.
I'm going to oversimplify this a little bit. When I look at your projected totals in 2038 of 294 people incarcerated, and we're talking about building a jail or capacity of 424 or 360, I mean, it's kind of like build it and they'll come type thing, you know. But I mean, I think we would have a hard time selling it to the community that we want to build a 424-bed jail when our projections show 294 people. I mean, I understand realism versus...
Which is why I gave you the other option. Many times counties will say, I'm going to build a lower number with the ability to add. It's a 64-bed housing unit that's taken away from that option. That's how I got that number lower. And they would say, we're going to keep that 164-bed housing unit. We're going to figure out how to expand in the future, but we're going to build this capacity to begin. And many counties look at that as a way to not soften the impact, but a way to maintain control over the capital costs associated with the project. I've seen counties build part of that additional housing unit and do what's called shelling it, not finish it out on the inside, but have the exterior walls done, finish it out in the future. But again, the capital side of the project is going to take longer in terms of getting started than looking at pretrial services. You're going to know relatively soon the impact of pretrial services. And so you'll be able to gauge what that is. I am not recommending you not do the capital side. Part of my recommendation the next time we meet is going to be to begin the design process, to select a team to take the capital side of it further so that your costs are refined, but you'll have to strip away some of these options. You'll have to decide, is option 4 even feasible? Will we even go to the voters for something in the $75 million thing when we have a $46 million option over here? And so if you want to tell me today option 4 is not feasible and option 1 is not feasible, but option 2 or 3 are the ones that we should add more detail to, that will be fine, or you keep them all there. But the numbers are the relationship between the numbers is going to continue to be the same, other than in option 1 status quo. When you put in all the staffing and transportation numbers, it's going to bump that number up.
I'm not going to speak from other commissioners, but I would think that going forward, that option 1 is probably going to be off the table. That's the general consensus, and that's to just remain like we are. I don't see how we can do that. That's sticking our head in the sand if we do that one. That's for sure. I sure don't want to do away with number 4, but I mean, I want to look at the options that are there, but it's pretty expensive pill to swallow. Monty, back when the last time the jail project come up, wasn't that about a $40 million project that the votors turned down?
Actually, it was $46 million.
$46 million, and that was in what year?
2014.
That was the Justice Center and everything.
Yeah, I never realized that. And now we're not even talking about a Justice Center, and we're still looking at $75 million. You know, so
yeah, the costs haven't gone down. That time back then, the economy was right for a capital project. The numbers have changed since then.
And how many beds would we have built that back then?
That was going to be mine.
320.
Yeah, it was different than what's being recommended now because the numbers had changed some, but we were again trying to be very conservative. So,
but even the 325, that would have been. Looking forward into the crystal ball as to what's already happened, I mean, that would have been a big savings to the taxpayer over those period of years. And I think going forward, we're going to have to look at it that way too. It's, you know, it's going to be pay me now or pay me later. We got some serious soul searching to do.
Did we ever look at, going back a few slides, the 91 plus day inmates? We have 86 more from 2013 to 2017. Do we ever look at why that? This might be more of a law enforcement question. Why do we have 86 more serious crimes in Saline County?
I don't know that the 86 more were charged with serious offenses.
But they could have been. I mean, that's how we haven't looked, did we look into that 86 number to say?
I don't, you know, there was other stuff in that report. I don't know that we looked at the crimes they were charged with. We looked at decision points in their stay in custody, when they went to hearings, when they had continuances, that kind of stuff. But the data is there, and it would bear pulling that out. We may have some. Let me go back and check and see if we have some of that.
Like if it's the same number of crimes, they're just staying longer, they're just shifting into a new bucket.
But it's not the same type of crimes.
Yeah, was it all a drug-related offense? Was it all a domestic violence offense? Was it all an alcohol-related traffic offense or something? You know, I don't have an answer to that one, but
One leg of the stool.
yeah, absolutely.
And are the domestic charges, as an example, of drug-related, you know, maybe just probably goes back to that in the real big picture of things.
Well, oftentimes, at least during my career, we found that that one crime, one charge, also has companion charges associated with it because one is precipitating the behavior, and it's not as simple as it used to be years ago.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say law enforcement's gotten a little bit more complex.
Does anybody have a statistic on percentage of population, I mean, of incarcerated people per population? I mean, are we more violent than other communities?
Your reported arrest for violent crimes is higher than the rest of the state. I don't know how you compare nationally.
So that first statistic that you gave was, my understanding was just increases over the last so many years. I'm saying, does Saline County have a higher percentage of population incarcerated than Douglas County, or does that make sense? And then I'm asking, I mean, is there a percentage?
Well,
See, that's just an increase.
yeah, that was the increase over time. Today, I don't know if you do the challenge
Per
for me-
capita or whatever the right term is.
I see what you're trying to get at, the number
Are
of,
we-
we're a 55,000 population county, and we've got 260 in jail. How does that size up against,
Lawrence.
well, even, I can tell you how it sizes up against Lawrence and Johnson County. We're way higher, because we saw that number coming out of there. But if you take it into Ellis County or McPherson County or Reno
Yeah,
County,
anywhere.
there would be a good question, Shawnee County, you know. And that's a pretty good question. Can we find it? Can you work on that number for us? Or
Yeah.
somebody, I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe,
I mean,
I'll
maybe
just
I
ask.
have to-
You know what, I think, a while back, somebody, I think, I'll talk to Todd Heitschmidt, because I think Todd had the statistical data for arrests, misdemeanors and felonies, violent, non-violent, per capita, and there was a Saline County compared to others. But let me do a little checking on
Yeah,
that.
and for me, the caution is that you have to do an apples to apples. If you just want to see how you compare to another county as a way to digging into, are we doing something different? But it's your policies and practices here that are driving those numbers. And if the other counties have done something different, then you say to yourself, can we do that? Or we're comfortable with what we do, and here's the impact of that.
Which is exactly where we're coming from on the pretrial thing.
Absolutely.
On Johnson County and Douglas County. Exactly where we're coming from.
But the arrest would be the telling story. Are we, not the length of stay, not anything else, are we that much more violent than other counties? And I'm not saying we are, I just don't know.
You guys should be able to gather some of that too from your counterparts across the state, right, Roger?
Some of them.
Well, yeah, and I mean, am I wrong?
Doesn't the
We
city
only
do most of the
wanna,
arrests?
Yeah,
yeah, the city does the rest, but
A lot of the major crimes occur within the city of Saline.
Just to guess off, is that 90%? I mean, your office does 10% of the arresting, they do
Probably.
90%? That's just a guess, you know, totally a guess.
Yeah, probably, that's probably correct.
So back to the point, do we keep all four options on the table, or is that a decision for you to ponder and give me some direction, or do we take any of those off the table and focus on What are those, do we take any off the table and then focus on the remaining ones and bring that information back, or do we keep all 4 there as we go forward with the comparison?
I'll go back to my first comment. I think option number 1 is to remain status quo is not on the table for me, anyway.
I was just gonna say, it's like, when we start talking about this type of information and these type of numbers, I wouldn't want to vote on anything today, right now, to even give you a direction.
Okay.
You know, if you give us a week to come back and say,
Sure.
okay, I mean, because I would like to have a discussion with somebody and sit back and say, okay, hey, just to hear this type of deal here, I wouldn't want to.
It's a lot of information for today.
Yeah.
And I've gotten this information before, so, I mean, I have my personal views, and one of the reasons why I don't want to give you any direction is this is eventually what the public wants us to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're not looking just for 3 votes here to proceed. I mean, you're looking for, you know, the public is eventually going to say, come to us, because they're our bosses, come to us and say, option 1's off, option 4's off. And I want to hear from the public too.
Okay.
Mr. White?
Because I think in the past, it was pushed down to the public, and that's why it failed.
Yeah.
Well, and not just the jail thing, I'm talking anything. I mean, there's just a lot of things that we need to hear from our constituents and what they think.
Okay.
Me personally, option 4 is off, option 1 is off. And I'll talk to the public about things like that, but in the end, they're going to be the ones that decide.
Well, the direction I'm looking for today is just, you know, we've got more work to do. We're not taking any option off the table. My question was, is there any of those 4 that you would say, don't spend as much time on that, spend more time on this? But what I'm hearing is, we might as well continue with all 4 options, put that operational number, those staffing numbers there, do some more refining of the numbers and bring them back again for further conversation.
Again, I'll ask for your comment there, Mike, because, I mean, there's 2 of us that said with no, option 1, we could probably take that off the table.
I'm not ready to make any decisions right now, but I do have a question for you, sir. I've been reading a lot of history books, and I believe this discussion was probably addressed to the commissioners back then in regards to the addition on the new jail. 91, 92, I think completion was 94. But the commission at that time, I understand, had consultants, advisors, and bottom line is they were sold, and of course the voters were sold on a half-cent sales tax or quarter, whatever it was at the time, were sold on the premise that additional pods could be added onto that jail.
Mm-hmm.
And been a long time ago, and the construction things changed, and of course security's all changed. But my question to you, sir, is that is not an option in your eyes?
Oh, no, that's option number 3, is to add at that site. My concern is I don't know if there is enough area there to do all of option 3, because option 3 is more than just housing. But you are correct, to the west side of that site was land that was set aside for additional housing units. I think the corridor, the main corridor going down has a door at the end of it, both for egress purposes, but as well as to add on the other housing units.
So the pod complex, similar to what's already there now, is going to be different configuration for the special needs in your eyes?
Typically, it would be a different type of housing unit. We would make the best use that we could of the existing space, but it would be housing units now, especially for the special needs folks, are smaller and have a lot more daylight and other access to fresh air and recreation, just to help manage behavior. But there is land there. I just don't know if it's enough.